Welcome back to another episode of the Crime Scene Insiders podcast. I'm your host, Angela Davies, and I'm here with my co-host, Dion Watson, and we're going to take you back under the barrier tape.
As well as the two of us today, we are also joined by a special guest, the lovely Steve Horgan. We're really excited to have Steve come along on the podcast today. He has an absolute wealth of experience in the world of crime scene investigation, crime scene management, and that's both within the police force and the National Crime Agency. So he has a lot of great stories that he's going to be sharing with us today. So welcome, Steve, and thank you for coming along today.
Thank you, no problems. And it's nice to be called lovely.
Well, you are very lovely. We always love catching up with you. So, Steve, we thought as a good way to kick off would be for you to give us a bit of a background about yourself. So a bit about your career, because we know it's absolutely varied and long spanning. So if you could give us a bit of information about yourself, that would be fantastic for our listeners.
When you say long spanning, that makes me sound really, really old. But I did start working when I was very, very young. So
You did.
yeah. Just before I do start, I'd say when we first met, the Forensic Expo down in London, you'd done a presentation. I sat there and listened to your presentation, and that gave me an insight into really what I was going to do when I retired. And then I got up after you to do a presentation on serious and organised crime at the time and the use of forensics.
That's right.
We stayed for that one.
Did you?
We did our presentation, then we stayed for yours because we just thought this sounds absolutely brilliant, and it was.
It was.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
I often meant to ask you that. I often meant to ask you if you'd stayed.
Yes, we did. We did.
Oh, well, good.
Oh, check that out. Us inspiring a bit of your future as well.
Yeah.
I know, that's great.
I didn't know that.
No, I didn't know that.
It gave me a good insight, because at the time I was quite interested in something that you'd been working in with major disaster type work. But I think, did you do body recovery and victim identification?
Yeah, so, well, my master's was in mass fatality management and victim identification, and then we went on to work as consultants for a private company as disaster response consultants, and we worked on a number of airline disasters, and we covered a number of different areas and aspects. So we worked on body repatriation, some of the DVI stuff, personal effects. We worked across the span of mass fatality, really. And that expo presentation, it must be going back to 2015, 2016.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's a while ago. Now the Chartered Society approached us and asked us to do it because we were talking about how we'd taken our forensic skills and our crime scene skills and transferred them into the disaster response arena and into kind of the private sector.
Yeah, I remember that, because that then gave me an insight that, well, maybe there is life after forensic operations. There was other things that I could use my skill sets for. So
well, I can't quite believe that we inspired you, Steve, because you're
there you go. You see,
yeah, that's lovely. That
it is lovely.
There you go. So I got into crime scene. I joined GMP in 1993, but prior to that, I was in the military. I was in the RAF, and I first came across sort of crime scene work when I was in the Falklands, and there'd been a crash. A Chinook had crashed into one of the mountains, and quite a few Gurkhas were killed on it. It was over 10. It might have been about 15, 17. And I was an airman then in the Air Force, and myself and the corporal I was working with, Tony, were asked to go to the crash site and take photographs to be sent back to the UK. So they loaded us up onto a Chinook, and they were just about to set off and fly us up there. And then you had to wear headsets, and over the headsets, the loadmaster asked for Corporal Winnell and SAC Horgan to make themselves known. So we both stick our hands up, and the loadmaster comes round and says, "Look, you both are going to have to get off the the aircraft, we've got to send more medics up. And Tony shouted our corner, said, look, we've been told we've got to go. We've got to set photographs for UK government for press release and such like that. Well, no, medics are more important, so off you get. Yeah, so Tony and I were just left on the pan, quite fuming really that we hadn't gone up, and we were told, right, you're going up on that next Chinook. So we waited for the third Chinook. There was only 3 Chinooks on the island, and the second one went up to the crash site, and that one actually crashed as well. Crashed into the side of the mountain while it was hovering. No fatalities on that one. So Tony took the best decision ever and told the loadmaster on the third Chinook that we wasn't going to go on that one. That we'd find our own way there. And there was a company called Bristol. Yeah, there was a company called Bristow's, and they flew Sea Kings. So we went up on a Sea King and did the work that we had to do. And I realised then that there was because at that time I was into reconnaissance. That was my role in the Air Force, and this was like a different role that I was doing, and it just sort of gave me a bit of an insight. Anyway, I moved on from the Falklands, came back, I got promoted, and I got posted out to Germany. And in 1989, there was an RAF corporal and his young baby were shot and murdered by the IRA. So I was the duty crew in this section. So I had a number of photographers working with me, a number of air processors, which I was at the time, and I had to send a photographer to the crime scene and to cover the post-mortem. And the photographer that I was sending, his missus had only just had a baby, the same as my wife had. My eldest son was born at that time, and I felt a bit guilty sending an airman onto this job. So I told him I would go with him. Because it was the fatality of a baby that had been shot. So I went along to that one. That was the first time I'd seen a real body close up, but it really gave me an insight into what I wanted to do when I'd left the Air Force. Whilst I was in Germany, my sister-in-law worked for GMP, and she came out to Germany to visit us, and she says, oh, just let you know, GMP are recruiting crime scene photographers and crime scene investigators in their forensic department. And that sort of gave me, oh, that sounds interesting. That's what made me apply for a job it was a SOCO then, Scenes of Crime Officer. I got through the assessment, got interviewed, and I was lucky enough to get a job. So that was March 1993. So that's when my career started as a Scenes of Crime Officer.
Brilliant.
That's amazing. So GMP, for those listening who may not know, is Greater Manchester Police, and it's a large police force in the northwest of England. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Manchester. It's a great city. Just going to take you back then to when you saw your first dead body. It sounds like it was quite a brutal one, that. And then, of course, you just had a baby yourself, and that must have been quite impactful, but obviously it didn't put you off moving forward in this line of work. So how did you find it? How did you feel doing that first job?
Well, I suppose it was quite a shock at first. It was quite a frightening scene to see, just this little baby on a mortuary table. My thing was, I need to make sure that Lee gets through this because he had a young baby as well. So I was more concentrating on that. And it was later on, I suppose, when I was back home a few days later, you give a bit of thought to these things, and it was still in the news what was going on. And the way I sort of looked at it was, I've just got to take myself away from that shock and do something myself. And I think I used to play squash and socialise in other ways, play pool and darts and go around the local bar in Germany. And that sort of took me away from it. It gave me something else to think about. And that's what I've done all the time now. Every major incident I've dealt with and body that I've dealt with, switch off from it and do something totally different, whether it's something playing football with my kids or going out for a walk or just taking you away. Life's too busy. I think my own personal life was too busy doing other things, particularly having a young family. That you can't keep mulling these things over. So I was able to define and step away from it. So I never really let it affect me that much.
That's quite interesting because we've talked about how we deal with some of these things, and we've talked about it with a couple of other people as well. And we often talk about detachment, but it sounds like you were compartmentalizing. So that was work, and that stayed in one box, and then you compartmentalized aspects of your life to be able to switch off and cope from it.
Yeah, I think so. I suppose it's keeping a busy personal life. You can't mull over what you've seen. You've just got to concentrate because there's other issues there, and that's tended to work for me. Whether it's the best thing for everybody, I don't know. You just do. I suppose everyone's different, and you just do what you think is best for yourself. So
you've got to find your own ways of coping, haven't you?
Yeah, and I think I'm quite lucky, really. My missus has always been really supportive, and she keeps me busy. If I look like I'm mulling things over too much, she'll step in and give me head a wobble and say get on with it. So
give you a task to do.
Yeah.
Have you put that shed up yet?
That's it. So
you mentioned the transition from the Air Force through to the police force there. How did you find that transition? Was there much of a change moving between the organisations?
No, I to be honest, I found it really easy because there was a structure, there was a pecking order, there was a rank structure. You knew who was the boss, who was in charge. You knew who your colleagues were. You were all on a sort of peer level with your others. The one thing that I did find that threw me in the military, you didn't apply for promotion. You got promoted on your achievements throughout the year. You had a yearly assessment. Under that yearly assessment, you were recommended, or you were highly recommended, or you specially recommended for promotion. So you were picked for promotion. What I found when joining the police is you applied for promotion when a vacancy came up, and you worked and gained your evidence and gained your experience in the period of time you was in that role to apply for the next role. So that was something I found interesting, and that sort of gave me a goal when I first started. I thought, oh, I could do well in this if I knuckle down and get on with it. I could probably do all right here. So I actually applied for my first supervisor's post before I'd finished my 2-year probationary period.
Really?
So yeah.
Brilliant.
And it's sort of, the good thing was I did the application. My application was successful, and I had to do a presentation and a bit of an assessment, and I failed the assessment. I did the presentation okay, but I knew at that time that I wasn't ready to be promoted anyway. I certainly wasn't ready to be a crime scene manager. I could supervise staff, but not as a crime scene manager. So, but it gave me an insight. I thought, right, well, that's what I need to do next time.
Well, that's experience, isn't it? Even if you didn't feel ready, pushing yourself forward, put your name out there, but then also gives you the experience of going through that process. So actually, when you are ready, you've got all that in the bag, haven't you? Really?
Well, yeah,
it's a good way of doing it.
That did give me the sort of things that. So you then knew what the milestones you needed to hit, and do, and get your experience in to get involved to get to the next one. Because in GMP, you applied there was I think there was about 120 CSIs. There was 12 divisions, I think 12 or 13 divisions. So there was 12 supervisors. Them supervisors were crime scene managers and crime scene coordinators. That was all one role. So he's a supervisor, crime scene manager, crime scene coordinator in one. Most of the roles at that time when I first started were detective sergeants in the role. So there was no civilians at that stage. So in the first 2 years that I was a SOCO there, some of the sergeants had started to be replaced with civilians. So I knew then that yes, there will be a structure, and I will be able to move up.
You must have been going in when it was just transitioning from police into civilian. Yes. Yeah, you were one of the first civilians in, were you?
So they'd had you're probably aware of this. There'd been a big review after the Yorkshire Ripper inquiry. There was a review into forensics, and some of the things that came out of the review was about civilianising and professionalising the scenes of crime trade. That forensics should be a unit within the police. It should be its own branch or section, and should be headed by someone with a forensic qualification. So you got lots of head of forensics roles then, and they weren't DCIs. They were starting to become civilians. So when I started, GMP recruited 20 civilians. Okay. So I started there in the March. First day I was posted to a place called Salford, which was quite a busy division. It was a good division to work, and I arrived there with a lad called Les Jones, and we both arrived as two of the new civilians in this office at Salford. It was headed up by a detective sergeant, quite old school. There was a few DC officers there doing scenes of crime work, and a couple of civilians, two of which were on their course up at Durham when Les and I first arrived. So there was no room in the office when we got there. So the sergeant just said to us, right, well, you're going to have to work in there. So we went in this room, and it was just covered in powdered up cowlings and bits of property and one thing and another.
Sounds like they put you in the cupboard.
yeah, that was it. So that's what he did. He says, you'll have to sort it out yourself. So I said, well, you know, being new to this, I said, well, do we put a works order in and get it painted and cleaned out? And no, you'll have to sort it out yourselves. So, and I was quite lucky because my father-in-law worked for GMP. He was security over at headquarters. So I phoned him up. I said, look, do you have any stuff over there? Desks and chairs are out. He said, oh, he says, you're quite fortunate, really. The top floor's just been refurbished. And the top floor at Chester House, where the chief and the ACC and a couple of the deputies, the deputy and a couple of the ACCs were, he says, they've just put all their stuff in the basement. Come and have a look. So we arrived on a Monday. On the Tuesday, Les and I went over to the headquarters. We had a look what was there. We collared some stuff, and then we went back to Salford. Managed to get hold of a van, and Les and I decided that we would stay on after the day shift had gone. We got a van. We went over to headquarters. We got a couple of desks. We got some filing cabinets. We got some really nice chairs. We got some carpet. And we went back and we stripped the office out. We slapped a bit of paint on the walls. We fitted some carpet, made it a proper office sort of environment. And the sergeant came in the next day and went apeshit at us. So yeah, because we had better desks than he had. The office was better than his now. We wanted to know where we'd got it all from. We said we were getting a lot of trouble for having that. Anyway, we just carried on. And so that was what we did.
Brilliant. And well, he did tell you to do it yourself and use your own initiative.
Yeah. So we did. It was using a bit of initiative.
I love that.
So what used to happen then was, because it was a really busy division, there was a couple of people away on the course up at Durham. So the sergeant used to send me and Les out before we were trained with just a couple of jobs, just some basic jobs, car crime, go and fingerprint a car, and maybe do a shed break or whatever it is. We picked up the odd burglary. So Les and I would go out and we'd take it in turns. One would drive and one would do the fingerprinting, and then the next day I'd drive and Les would do the fingerprinting. We were coming back from doing some jobs one day, and we're driving back to the office. We see two police cars with the lights on in front of us, and they race into what was the sort of port area alongside the canal. I was driving. I said to Les, I said, oh, hey, looks like there's a bit of something going on there. Maybe we should go and see if they need any scenes of crime support. With these two police cars shot in with the lights going and the sirens going, and Les and I drove in behind them, not knowing what to expect when we got there. And the next thing we hear is, cut! And we realised that we've drove onto the set of a TV show called Cracker that had Robbie Coltrane as the forensic psychologist. So we beasted a hasty retreat and went back to the office, and we never said anything about it for about 12 months, and then we declared what had happened. So
she knew the people would be taking the piss for days.
Yes. Yeah. So that was.
Did you meet Robbie?
He was on the set.
Was
at
he?
The time, but we didn't stay long enough to meet anybody. Once we realised what mistake we'd made, we just shut off, just disappeared. I don't even know whether it ever appeared on the programme or not. It'd be interesting to see if it was ever on the programme.
Go back through old footage.
So yeah.
Just see you reversing out there, like, run away.
Yeah. So
you went from RAF to crime scene investigator to film star.
That's it. All in a matter of weeks. So,
your life's never been the same since.
That was good. So I really enjoyed starting off as a scenes of crime officer. I spent a couple of years at Salford. Really enjoyed it. It was a big range of of work. There was regular major crime, lots of shooting, stabbings, lots of armed robberies, lots of your normal routine, burglaries and car crime. So there was always something to get involved with.
Did you start off as just doing volume crime only, or were you dropped straight into moving straight into major crime?
No, you more or less got dropped straight into it, particularly because they put you on a shift rota, and there was only 2 years on of a weekend. So if work happened over the weekend, a major incident came in, a shooting, stabbing, death, whatever, you had to deal with it, and then you was on call as well. So if there was a body or a murder happened, then you was the first person to go to it. And on a number of occasions, you'd be the only person that would attend. Particularly if it was a domestic murder, you would just get on with it. And then there was no mobile. There was one mobile phone in the force that the duty supervisor had. So if you needed to get hold of someone, you could contact them. But other than that, a lot of the time you just left to get on with it, which was quite good, really, because it certainly exposed you to decision making and dealing with things and making sure you got things right the first time. So
it's a great way to cut your teeth, isn't it, as a crime scene investigator in a city like that where you've got such a vast array of different crime types. It is really sink or swim, I would think.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
So it must have been really interesting for you particularly, like I say, with the variety. Is there any one case that stands out for you that you remember as you were first coming in, or kind of through those early years as a scene investigator? I
did one before the Twin Towers. There'd been a couple of incidents. There'd been a bombing in Manchester, and my pager went off, so I'll go back in the house and phone up the control room, see what it was. And they'd told me that there'd been an air crash at Barton Airfield, which isn't far away from where I live, and they thought that it was possibly terror related. So they asked me to go along to that, and I attended this air crash, and it was just like it was a 4-seater plane, takes off at a grass runway. So it had taken off at the airfield, gone up, and was circling round and crashed onto a car park area it's called Macro. Like a big cash and carry.
Oh yeah.
So it had crashed there. When a plane takes off from a small airfield, it didn't need air traffic control permission. Yeah, so the police contacted Manchester Airport to see if this plane had asked for permission to take off, and it didn't need to, so it hadn't. So they put 2 and 2 together and thought, it didn't ask for permission. It must have been doing something wrong. So they put a terror badge on it straight away. And I think there were Turkish, the pilot and the co-pilot. They had a load of photography equipment in with them. So they just thought they'd be doing some recce's over something and thought they might have been planning a job. The air crash investigation team came along to that, and I worked alongside them for that day. And it turns out it was a fairly big fault on the plane. It was 2 photographers worked for a Turkish news agency. I say this was a Sunday morning. Man United had played the night before at Old Trafford, and they'd been along to take photographs and review the game because Manchester United were due to play Galatasaray in the Champions League on the Wednesday. So it turned out it was all innocent, but that really stuck because I thought, I like the idea of this, major stuff like this, plane crashes, train crashes, and such like that. And I think that's why I took notice of what you said at your presentation all them years later, because of the way you dealt with major disaster. So for me then, I got a bit of an inkling into bits like that. I did all me training and everything, did all that, and then I sort of in GMP you could channel your way into different areas. Some went into arson, some went into major disaster, and the major disaster part at the time was really poor. They didn't do a great deal. They'd had a couple of incidents, and then you're probably aware there was a couple of train crashes. There was one at Selby. There was one down in London. There was two in London, and I got to meet the sergeant who was in charge of the forensic investigations from BTP. So I'd spent some time with him, and he invited me to. He said, next time we get a major incident, I'll invite you along. So he took me along to Selby, he took me down to London, Paddington, and then to another one down in London, and so that helped me to build up GMP's response to major disaster. So I got involved in that then. So I cut my teeth doing bits and pieces like that. I'd applied for a promotion and got knocked back. I applied for another promotion as a supervisor, and I came second. This other supervisor gets the job, and about a week later, another supervisor left, so they put a temporary promotion in place, and they offered me the temporary promotion in Lee. So I took what was going to be a 6-month temporary promotion. It turned into 12 months, and then I got promoted properly. Then spent some time at Lee, and then went back to Salford as a supervisor there, and I was just doing major incident type work then, murders, shootings, and I'd been over to a presentation at Old Trafford for Smart Water. A number of the supervisors went, and we all decided to go for a pint afterwards. Whilst I was there, my pager went, and the detective super from Salford wanted me to ring him, so I rang him. He says, "Look, we've got an ongoing serious and organised crime job at the moment that I can't tell you too much about, but I need you here for 6 o'clock tomorrow morning." So I had to knock the drinking on the head and socialising. Yeah.
You're showing your age, like you pager.
Sorted out. Yeah, it was then. So, and I turned in on the following morning to Salford, and I got briefed up on this operation that had been running for months and months, and I knew very little about. And what had happened was there was a couple of gangs in GMP. There was some corrupt officials, prison officers. There was some corrupt officials within BT, British Telecom, that were transferring phone lines and tapping phones for criminals and such. And I thought, oh wow, this is all a new world. And I was informed that there'd been a kidnapping, and that 2 people had been held in a horse box over on a moss between Salford and Lee in Wigan. So I had to turn out to this job, and they took me in a Land Rover over to this moss, and there was like an old caravan there, you would see on a campsite, one of the big static ones. There was a horse box, there was an old tractor, and it was on a moss, and all these things were just slowly sinking ever so much. So two lads had been held active in a horse box over a number of days, and tranquilized, kept sedated with some horse tranquilizer. It turns out that these 2 lads managed, it sounds a bit bizarre, it sounds like something that would come out of a film really, but they managed to switch the drinks that these tranquilizers were in to the people that were holding them. So these bottles of water had the tranquilizer in, they managed to switch them off, so the people that were holding them ended up falling asleep, and the 2 people were able to make their escape and then inform the police. So I had to go out and examine this slowly sinking crime scene. I don't think I've ever told you this story before.
No,
I can't remember.
No, you haven't.
So there's this slowly sinking crime scene. The horse box, which had blood in it, and the ties that the people were in, was slowly going down. So I'd seen this tractor on the side, and I thought, if I can get it moved, it's going to be much better for me. So I shouted up on the radio if anyone from traffic could drive a tractor, and a guy said, "Yeah, I can do that." So he says, "I'll be there." So he turns out, and it turns out he was the husband of one of the CSIs, so he knew a bit about our work anyway. So he turned out, and he had a look at this tractor. He says, "Probably what I can do is it's got a high ab on the back. I can maybe lift it out and move it across for you." So I said, "Yeah, that's brilliant." So he gets the tractor working, he gets the high ab working, moves the crane over the top of the horse box, and puts some lashings around it so he can lift it off. And the pneumatics went in the tractor, and the thing came down and crashed through the horse box.
Oh no!
So that ruined my scene, really. But I got enough out of it to prove the offence. And then there was some concerns then that an aeroplane had been stolen from the same airfield where the crash had been some years previous at Barton, and they thought that the organised crime gang had gone up in the air in a plane and were going to shoot us from this plane. So they put an air cordon around the area. They shifted us out first off, then they put an air cordon around the area, then they put each force had its own helicopters. Then it was before it was the National Airframe Service. So GMP's helicopter was up, but they asked Merseyside's to come. I think Cheshire's was there. So like 3 helicopters all flying around over me crime scene, protecting us.
Wow.
That sounds amazing.
So yeah, so dealt with that one, and then I got embedded into that job then, and there was all sorts going on. There was telephone calls being made from Cat A prisons. There was a guy from BT who was tapping the lines into the police station trying to pick up information. There'd been lots of shootings. So I thought, oh, see, it's an organised crime. That sounds good. And then I met the guy whose job I later took over from within serious and organised crime. He worked for the National Crime Squad. He was their coordinator. So I met him, did some work with him around this ongoing incident, and found out that this job had been running for months. There was lots of people involved in it. I got taken into this inner sanctum of the green room where everything was up on boards about what activity had been going.
Not many people get in there.
Yeah.
No.
And I'm thinking, I've been the supervisor on this division for I don't know how long, and I didn't know any of this was going on.
What's going on?
So it was really, yeah. So then I thought, oh yeah,
what we used to call sneaky beakies.
Yeah.
Sneaky beaky. Yeah. That was our nickname, wasn't
squirrel.
it? Secret squirrel.
So I got involved in that job, and then I'd applied for a promotion again as one of the unit managers. There was 2 unit managers in GMP, so I applied for one of the jobs there. I came second, so Kevin got the job. And then what I started doing then was to develop myself. I'd got involved in serious and organised crime a bit. I'd got involved in the major disaster type work, and I started to get involved in doing some teaching. And I thought that'll all hold me in good stead. And I was running a GMP crime scene managers course, and I got a phone call there to say, look, we're thinking of having 3 managers and splitting. Because DNA had come in big style then. They'd recruited volume crime scene investigators. There was a DNA expansion program ongoing, so they funded another manager's slot. Yeah, out of that, and initially it was going to be for 2 years, but GMP thought we're going to want this permanently. So they were going to advertise for a permanent position. But what they wanted to do was they wanted to temporarily promote someone in the meantime to get it up and running. So because I'd applied for a job and been found successful but didn't come top, they asked me if I would take the temporary promotion, which I did. So that allowed me then, because I got the operational brief as well, which was quite good. So there was a lady that ran forensic submissions and the DNA expansion program. Kevin ran some of the operational divisions and had the budget, and I had some of the operational divisions and major disaster, major incident type crime, which was really good. That was right up what I wanted to do, and serious and organised crime. So that gave me a legitimate in to all these different sort of things I could do. So I started to build develop an area within serious and organised crime, and utilising forensics in a slightly different way. Although I enjoyed being a manager in GMP, I didn't like the fact that I was non-operational as such, actually going to the coalface and dealing with stuff. So I remained at GMP in management for about 2 years. I got a phone call to say, look, the National Crime Squad are recruiting a forensic manager. Would you be interested? So I said, yeah, I'm interested. So I applied for the job, didn't hear anything for months and months. And then I've a management meeting and my phone goes, and it's National Crime Squad HR. So they phoned me up and said, look, we've seen your application and we've shortlisted you for coordinator's job in the north, and we are going to be doing an assessment and interview day, which we're going to invite you along to. However, we're having a restructure, and we're putting in each of the areas, our command areas, of which there was 3, we're going to have a manager and a coordinator. And we think you would probably fit the manager's job better than the coordinator's job by looking at your application and your experience and such. Would you be interested in that? So I said, oh yeah. I said, is it more money? Is it? So yeah, it's more money. There was more perks with it. So I said, well, yeah. He said, well, right, the advert's going to go out in the next month or so. Then the recruitment process will begin. But what we'll do is we've seen your application, and so you don't need to apply. We will shortlist you for the manager's job as well. So I thought, oh, brilliant. That's even easier. So again, I never heard anything for ages. And then I get a phone call off the guy that I'd been working with when I was in JP, who dealt with the serious and organised crime job at Salford, Pete. So he phones me up, and he said, I've seen your application. And I'm thinking, well, I'm going to be working alongside. What have you seen my application for? And I was a bit arsey, really. So what do you mean you've seen my application? He says, yeah, I've seen it. It looks quite good. I said, you've got no right to see my application. He says, oh, let me explain. I'm the new head of profession. So I thought, oh no. Anyway,
after you've been
I had to go down for an assessment down at Y Boston, 3-day assessment, where they put you through loads of things, give you different scenarios to go through. Some of them are quite like watching what's gone on, seeing things that have happened, then planning the job. So you got a scenario that, right, there's going to be a meeting in this room. We want to be able to get someone's fingerprints and DNA. What would you do? You know, how would you plan it? You've got 10 minutes to make a plan. So that was sort of proactive and covert techniques, just to see if you had the mindset for it. And obviously I did all right at that. I got the manager's job after a 3-day assessment and interview, which I found really heavy going. We had to go out for dinner at the evening time. So I think there's about 40 of us being interviewed. So there's 40 of us all out for dinner at Y Boston, and some of the bosses were there just to see how you behaved in that sort of environment. So I did okay with that. I got offered that job. So it took me a while to get my feet under the table and understand the role. And it was totally different to what I've been used to dealing with, reactive crime, where something has happened and then forensics go in and investigate it. What was happening now is we were doing the investigation before the offences and the arrests had happened. And it took me a while to get my head round that and being proactive. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And the National Crime Squad morphed into the Serious and Organised Crime Agency, and then the Serious and Organised Crime Agency morphed into the National Crime Agency. So
which
all
is
in
what
all,
it is currently, isn't it?
That's what it is currently.
Yeah.
So I spent 20 years within Serious and Organised Crime, and really, really enjoyed it. It was a big broad spectrum of work. I went all over with it. Spent time in Bulgaria, the Ukraine, Afghanistan, all over Europe, doing operational activity, doing presentations, advising on serious and organised crime, advising and training on covert and proactive techniques.
So is it a nice blend then from so you were obviously crime scene investigator, crime scene manager, and then unit manager. So you were in the office, so you'd lost that. You weren't doing as much field stuff. Moving into serious and organised crime, were you getting a nice blend of management, training, and still operational work?
Yeah, very, very much so. We had a partnership with a forensic service provider, so they would provide us with CSIs when I first started, and them CSIs would deploy out and do all the reactive work, and myself and my coordinators would do all the covert activity. So the creeps, just the planning of covert and proactive activity, which was really, really interesting. And also within that role came like an international brief, where if the country had an issue, there was Brits involved, or they required some advice or some support, then we would often have to do that. So I run some overseas training courses, I did lectures, I did operational activity overseas, which was really interesting. Give you a broader picture of what was going on. It gave you an understanding of where the UK was forensically in a pecking order of different countries. You know, some were really good, some were much better than us, some were really poor at it. And I dealt with a job which I coordinated from. We had an issue in the Gambia where the head of the director general of the organisation had gone overseas doing like a bit of a tour around, and there'd been some ongoing issues in the Gambia, which had been a relatively safe, crime-free country, but there'd been some ongoing issues there with internal corruption and drugs coming into the country from South America. And a request was made through one of the overseas ambassadors if the UK would support an investigation that was ongoing that I think he was the Prime Minister of the country, had, whereby he thought some of his major officials were corrupt, and his major officials was the head of the military, head of policing, head of borders, head of their revenue people, Homeland Security and stuff like that. So he couldn't trust any of them. So there'd been an issue where they thought, and I think it was about 3 ton of coke had allegedly landed in the Gambia. The police had investigated it, but they'd only recovered about 3 kilos of it and said, "Oh, this is all it is."
Hell of a difference.
So we got asked if we would send a team to investigate it. They told us what they had. Landed with myself. So I had three staff, two forensic coordinators, traditional forensic staff, and 1 digital manager, and they deployed over there. So they had to get inoculated. They had to have lots of tablets for to keep themselves protected. We knew it was fairly safe, although there was some corruption, but we agreed with the Gambian authorities that they would be given bodyguards to look after them, that they would be sorted out accommodation wise. So that was all agreed. Then we decided that we would deploy 3 staff over there who went over for what was going to be about a week's work, but actually turned out into nearly 2 weeks they were there. And what they had to do was find out if there was 3 ton of coke somewhere around there. So there've been a number of people arrested. So they landed out. They went out there. They got briefed by the Prime Minister on the job, then set about investigating it. And
that must have been so exciting.
They all took ill while they were there. They all ended up with their stomach upsets and couldn't. Only one of them could work one day, and then the other one was ill. So, but they did get through it. So they went out to all these different crime scenes to see if they could find any trace of 3 ton of coke, which is going to be quite a substantial amount.
Well, yeah.
If you find it, you're going to know that's
you
it.
Really found it,
So they've been there about 3 days.
To hide unless it's broken down, I imagine, as well.
That's right. So they've been there about 3 days, and I made a good decision that what we would do each day, we would have a morning briefing, we would have an evening briefing, and that I would touch base with the 3 of them individually throughout the day, just to make sure they were okay, they were personally okay. And in the morning we'd brief up about what had gone on the night before, and then what they were hoping to achieve that day. And then so that was a real good decision that we made. So the digital guy set himself up in a room within the police station, and the 2 coordinators went out to the different crime scenes to assess what was there, and they were given a vehicle to drive around in to get themselves to all the things, and they were given an armed bodyguard as well for their protection. They'd been there about 3 days and nothing was found. The digital guy had been downloading loads of phones and digital cameras and one thing and another, and the 2 forensic coordinators had been to this big warehouse really that had been converted and was owned by 2 people who were the main offenders for this crime. They'd gone out to some holiday lets as well, because about 10 years previous this place had been really nice and people would go out there for an international holiday, and there was these holiday villas on stilts that would have been really nice 10 years previous, but they were really run down now. Lots of spiders and bits in there, so
not so nice.
So they'd gone out to assess all these areas. We knew that all these areas had already been forensically examined by some force that had been over there. I think the Americans had been over doing some assistance and nothing been found. Someone was actually living in one of the tilted houses, and in there we found lots of radio equipment, sea to air, air to ground, air to sea, radio transmitters and bits. And what we found out was drugs were being dropped off on a regular basis into the sea, and this fishing company with these 2 lads were going out on a boat and picking up the drugs as they were floating in the water. The drugs were put in packages with foam around them, so we found lots of foam things. So we thought, well, there's definitely some criminality ongoing. So it gave us an insight what was on the right thing, but we just couldn't find this 3 ton of coke. Anyway, we were briefing up one evening, and the 2 forensic staff had said, look, we've been around this warehouse, we can't find anything in there. There's lots of engines, there's lots of boat parts, there's lots of this foam, but we've not found any drugs. There's an office area that we've still got to search. So the digital guy says, an office area? Where's the office area? So he said, oh, it's at the end, it's a brick. He says, oh, I've seen some old photographs. I've downloaded some photographs today. So he goes through the downloads of the photographs. He had images of it being built, and one of these partners walking up and down this cellar before it had the top put on it at ground level. So we knew how deep it was.
Oh, fantastic.
So we thought that's where it's going to be. So that for me then showed that there was a real good collaboration between digital and traditional forensics and how well they can work together. So we then had to get permission to smash through this floor. And that took about 2 or 3 days. We had to escalate it really high to our government level for them to attack the Gambians to say, look, we've got to do this. And there was lots of defences being put up by all the different agencies in the Gambia, because obviously they knew that's where it was. Anyway, we get permission to smash through there, and we find all the coke.
2 tons of it.
3 tons. 3 tons of coke.
Wow.
Yeah, something like
what a find.
half a million euros, a couple of Kalashnikov weapons, some shotguns, loads of other bits and pieces. So that meant they had to stay there a lot longer. But the thing that we did, we made a really conscious decision right at the start, although these scenes had been gone through by other people, that we would deal with it like a UK crime scene. And very much like you said right at the start of this introduction, we'll take you underneath the tape. It was a case of we were putting the tape out again and saying, this is now a crime scene and we're going to deal with it as such, even though there's been other people through there. So we managed to do everything. We got some results from it. There were ultimately 14 people charged with offences. And at the time, the Gambians had the death penalty for drugs offences. So because the UK government won't support penalising someone with the death penalty, we threatened to pull all the evidence that we had until they changed that. So we had to wait a while for them to change their legislation to drop the death penalty to long custodial sentences, and it went to court in the Gambia. 14 people charged, but only 13 people turned up on the day for court. They all got brought out of the prison, but only 13. So when the judge asked where the 14th person was, they didn't know. So they had to check. And he died something like 7 months previous, and no one had informed anybody.
Really?
He died in prison. Yeah. So
wow.
So a trial ran. There was a few nationals in there: Europeans, Dutch, Belgians, Gambians. They all got really long custodial sentences. You're talking 40, 45 years plus, and these people were all in their 50s and 60s at this stage, so they weren't going to be coming out again. They got massive fines as well, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of euros worth of fines. And if they didn't pay the fines within a 12-month period, their sentences were almost being doubled. And their prisons weren't like the prisons here. It was hard labour.
Oh, I bet the brutal.
Yeah. So it was a brutal regime. So that was a really good insight.
What a fantastic result.
Amazing.
Amazing teamwork.
Yeah, the Gambian forensic team didn't have any equipment like what we would have. So we donated all the stuff that we took over there. We'd been given a vehicle to use. And when we was doing our final recap of everything, we knew there was a vehicle that had been used in crime outstanding. Yeah. And we found out that that's the one that we've been driving, or that they've been driving around in for the last 10 days or so. So
fantastic.
So
driving around in the vehicle that had been used in crime.
Yeah, all in all, a really good result. And that's one of the jobs that because it's gone through court, it's been in the public domain, it's had lots of coverage. So I use that one now when I'm doing presentations at universities and colleges and to policing organisations, just to show how forensics can work joined up, how to coordinate an operation. You don't need to be there to be able to do that. and how you can get success from it. So that was really, really good. So all in all, it was a job well done. And they actually burnt the three ton of coke on a beach.
On a beach?
They burnt it all on a beach on a big fire, and all sat around having a barbecue and a few beers watching it go up. So
I'm feeling it all.
So all in all was
I can imagine
that was
there
one
was
of
a
the
few drug traffickers crying their eyes out at that point.
Yes. Yeah. So that was one of the highlights of what I did. I did loads of other jobs, lots of kidnappings, lots of drugs and threats to life type offences. Developed a good knowledge of covert and proactive activity. It's an area that I really enjoyed being involved in. It's definitely not for everybody.
No.
Some people might think it's I could act doing that, but when you're creeping around in pitch black and you're out there on your own somewhere, it's not the nicest of environments to be in. There's quite a bit of risk involved in it, and certainly there's the organisations support you with a great deal of training. Now, in fact, I've got one more little short story about a training course that I did prior to deploying internationally.
Oh, go on, Steve.
Yes, please.
The organisation send you on. You do lots of training anyway as part of the organisation. You get trained into using an ASP, handcuffs, parva, spray, and such like that. How to defend yourself. You've not got powers of arrest, but how to, you've got certain powers. So how to defend yourself if it all kicks off and such like that. So I got deployed out to Afghanistan on a couple of occasions. So you had to do like an international safety course that sort of assisted you if you were attacked while you were overseas, if you were kidnapped, what to do and how to cope with things. So they send you away on a course, and it was an army run course down in Salisbury. So I arrives down there. It's October time. It's pitch black. I find this place. It's an old Ministry of Defence type building in the middle of nowhere. Bang on the door, and I say, I'm Steve. I just arrived to do the international training course. Oh yeah, come in. And so this big door opens with a creak, door opens and in I go, and this guy's sat at his desk and he's got like a register. He says, oh, what's your name again? So I'll give him my name. He says, oh yeah, you're in room 7. He said, I'm just letting you know, you're the 8th person to arrive. I said, all right, okay. He says, just a bit heads up. Normally the 8th person to arrive is the one that gets kidnapped midweek. I said, all right. I said, thanks for that. Thanks for letting me know. So I arrived in my room, which was on the first floor. I've got a big wardrobe, a big chest of drawers, a bedside table, and an old military style single bed, really heavy. So I decided, right, the wardrobe's going up by the window, so no one's going to get in there. The bed I'm going to put in front of the door with the chest of drawers, so no one's going to get in there. And that's how I did. I made my room safe that night. And then for the next 2 nights, I had a Passat estate. The next 2 nights, I slept in the back of my car.
Brilliant.
I was waking up with a really bad back, so I thought, oh, sod this for a game of soldiers. I'm just going to have to man up to this. Anyway, nothing happened to me in my room. But as part of the training, they do what they call a cross-decking exercise, which is where you learn how to, if in a 4x4 vehicle, Mitsubishi Shogun or Land Rover or something like that, you've got a bodyguard in the front, you've got a driver, and then we would always operate from the back of the vehicle. Normally 2 of you in the back of the vehicle, armoured vehicle. So they teach you that if your vehicle comes under attack, what you've got to do. So they pull you out and then they slam you into the back of another vehicle or into the boot of a vehicle. And you've got a tin hat on, you've got all your body armour on, you've got a rucksack with you with all your equipment. So there's lots of bangs and bruises and cuts and grazes, but essentially it gives you the confidence that you're going to be safe if something happens. And on the last day, they actually run a full exercise where you will be cross-decked, your vehicle will be near to an explosion, you will witness some activity, you might have to pick up a weapon and defend someone. So you've done all this training, you might have to administer some first aid. So there's 3 vehicles in a convoy driving around. We go into a wooded area, there's a big explosion, there's a fire, there's a vehicle on its side, there's a couple of people on the floor screaming. So you've got to jump out. There's gunshot as you jump out of the vehicle, and your bodyguard gets shot, and your driver gets injured. You've got people on the floor, so you've got to administer some first aid. You've got to protect yourself. You've got to try and get these people away from the fire. And I ran over to one guy to administer first aid, but he was quite close to the fire, so I grabbed hold of him by his legs to pull him away from the fire, and his legs came off in my hand, and blood just spurting all over. And he'd been a war veteran that had lost his legs, and he worked for this company now. So honestly, it was such a good course and gave you a massive amount of confidence. So
wow,
what was this one for, Steve?
So this was for international. It was international safety officer. So for allowing you to deploy to risky areas, a bit like Afghanistan was at the time, and Iraq. So that's been my career in a bit of a nutshell.
You didn't get kidnapped,
really.
Did you say?
No, I never got kidnapped. Although the second time I went, I spent the first 24 hours in the British Embassy under a desk with my tin hat on, because a bomb had gone off at the German embassy, which was just down the road in what was the safe zone. A petrol tanker had been blown up near to the German embassy. So to stay in the embassy and then work from there. So they told us you're better off just taking cover under wherever you think is most safe. So we ended up under a couple of desks and holding meetings under a couple of desks so we could get some work done while we were there.
So was that was real? The bomb going off at the German embassy, was that real then? So you've gone on an exercise and you think you...
No, I'd gone out on an operation over there to support. It was all to do with heroin coming into the country and how the Afghani police force was dealing with things. So I've gone out to help do some training over there. So
right, and then you ended up in a situation.
Yeah. So
that training came in useful.
It did. So currently at the moment my life's much quieter. I've done some of the work that you used to do, doing the inputs at schools for kids, which I really enjoy doing. I do inputs at some of the universities around serious and organised crime, and I run the course for the College of Policing on proactive forensics. So that keeps me busy now.
Essentially retired without retiring.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Probably that. So
do you think you'll ever be able to fully retire, Steve?
I enjoy it too much. I certainly enjoy the bits that I enjoy now is seeing the looks on kids' faces when they put a fingerprint on something, or when they've used a bit of powder to develop a mark, or when they found something interesting. And sometimes when I'm strolling around Tesco's, they'll shout, "Oh, there's the CSI, there's forensic man."
CSI Steve.
So
it's lovely. It's really rewarding, isn't it? Teaching kids, teaching the next generations. We find that as well. Your career has been so vast and you've done so much.
For someone so young.
For someone so young and so fresh-faced.
That's it.
I know, shouldn't extend it. It's so vast and you've been doing it for so long. It really is. And you'll give us a clip next time he sees us. And it sounds like you've had so many highlights as well and done so many different things, getting to work on just a huge array of different crime types and then working nationally and internationally as well. Is there anything that's ever that has stuck with you? We know earlier on you were saying about kind of how you compartmentalize and you just get on and keep yourself busy, but is there been anything that's really kind of stuck with you or impacted you significantly?
The one thing that did shock me, and this was when I first started as a CSI, and you asked something earlier about the young baby that I did my very first post-mortem, or supported at a post-mortem. I once did a young baby that had I can't remember the name of the disease, but essentially the plates in the head don't fuse together as they should do in the skull. This baby had they call it try something, because there was 3 like big things that came out of the baby's head, and ultimately that's what killed the baby. I had to cover the post-mortem on that. And that one stuck with me. I thought, how sad that a young kid is, at such a small age. She was only about 1. At small age, has had to go through all that. And what it did, it sort of reiterated to me early on that you can't dwell on a lot of stuff. You have got to be able to step away from it. And if you can't step away from it, and you can't deal with them sites, then crime scene isn't the career for you. There's other areas of forensics that you could probably get involved in, and certainly in my latter years working for the National Crime Agency, I met so many different forensic people. There's a massive array of forensic skill sets out there.
There really is, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's one of the things we hope to do on this podcast really is introduce people to more and more disciplines so people get an idea, because there's just so many different disciplines that you can get involved in without necessarily seeing those sites, because I think often people are very aware of crime scene investigation because of all of the programs about it. Like there was a big boom in it at one point, wasn't there?
Yes.
A lot of TV programs about it, and people often think that it's a really glamorous job, but it's
not.
It's not.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. It's never glamorous at 4 o'clock in the morning when you're covered in all sorts of body fluids because you just had to recover a body and put it in a bag. So
yeah, definitely not. And we often talk about the weird and wonderful places you find yourself in that you don't even expect. Like I don't think you think about it when you start out in this career. You just expect to be, but you just find yourself in the most weird and wonderful places, don't you? Is there any that stick out for you? I mean, I imagine hiding under a desk in Afghanistan was one of them.
Sitting under a desk in the ambassador's office in Kabul was one. Doing crime scene examinations on boats when the boat's still at sea. So we often had to examine vehicles for drugs, looking for drugs, or do some sort of other work on a vehicle. And sometimes you can only do it when it's in British territorial waters. So you might have been on a boat, say from Rotterdam into Hull, and you're on the boat for 13 hours, but you've got an hour when you can do the work because you've got to wait while it's in British territorial waters before you're authorised to do the work.
Goodness.
12 hours feeling sick, bobbing up and down on the car deck of a boat, but you can't do anything until you've crossed into British waters.
I was going to say, do you have good sea legs? You need them.
No, I'm not the best at travelling on sea. I much prefer airports. That's why I joined the Air Force. I much prefer airports and the smell of aviation fluid than anything else. So,
would you recommend crime scene investigation as a job?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. If you've got the right mindset for it, if you're joining it because you think it's sexy and Gucci and glamorous, then no, it's not for you. No. If you want to help people, if you want to be supportive and part of an investigation process, if you're happy to work long hours for not the best of pay, but in a job that can be very rewarding and challenging, then yeah, it's the job for you. So I don't necessarily think you need to have degrees or all the qualifications in the world to do it. My gut has always been common sense and an amount of educational knowledge, but you don't need to be Einstein to do it. Some of the best CSIs that I know never had a degree, were just really good at thinking things through and getting involved. So
we say the same thing, don't we?
We do.
Yeah. Be able to think outside the box, have a logical and methodical mindset. Common sense is the biggest thing.
Common sense is the biggest thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
problem is, it's just not that common these days.
No, that's true.
Not so much.
That's true. So.
Yeah, I think that seems like a good place for us to round up. Steve, you've got such a fascinating career. I think we could talk for hours and hours with you about your experience. I think, we could have quite a few episodes worth of just Steve stories, I think.
Definitely. Maybe we should start a different podcast called Steve Stories.
Yeah, Steve Stories. I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time today, because evidently even though you're retired, you're still busy away there. So thank you so much for taking the time out and coming and discussing everything with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problems.
And thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you've really enjoyed this episode as much as we have. And we will see you in a fortnight's time, where we will take you back under the barrier tape.